Socrates is remembered not just for his questions, but for his courage in not knowing. His greatest strength was not his answers, but his curiosity. He once said, "I know that I know nothing," and in those 7 words he exposed the arrogance of the world. Because true ignorance does not come from not knowing. It comes from believing you already do. The first dangerous person Socrates would warn you about is the one who pretends to know everything. The person who speaks with absolute certainty, but has never taken the time to question their beliefs. They are not wise. They are loud. And often they are followed. Not because they are right, but because they are convincing. This kind of person is everywhere. They can be a teacher, a friend, a boss, a stranger on the internet. They have opinions on everything: politics, morality, science, art. But if you ask them where they got their knowledge from, they stumble. They speak in absolutes, not because they understand deeply, but because they are afraid of being challenged. And instead of saying, "I do not know," which requires courage, they pretend to know, which only requires ego. Socrates believed that wisdom begins with the admission of ignorance. To say, "I do not know," is not a weakness. It is the starting point of all knowledge. But the know-it-all skips that process. Build a house of certainty on a foundation of assumptions, and then invite others to live inside it. If you walk into that house, you will feel safe, at first. You will think, "Finally, someone who understands the world." Slowly, that safety turns into stagnation. Your questions become unwelcome. Your doubts are labeled as foolish. Your curiosity is treated like a threat. This person does not want to grow, and they will make sure you do not either. They thrive in environments where no one challenges them. And if you try to ask questions, they will use shame, sarcasm, or even intellectual bullying to shut you down. They are not here to exchange ideas. They are here to win. They want the last word, the upper hand, the illusion of superiority. But here is the cost. When you spend enough time around someone who pretends to know everything, you begin to silence your own inner voice. You hesitate before asking questions. You second-guess your instincts. You trade your thinking for their approval. And the most dangerous part is, you may not even realize it is happening. Because this person does not yell at you to conform. They simply speak so loudly that you forget what your own voice sounds like. Socrates spent his life confronting these kinds of people. He walked the streets of Athens, asking questions that exposed the fragility of false knowledge. He understood that true growth comes not from knowing, but from asking, and that is why the know-it-all is so dangerous. They are the enemy of questions, the opponent of introspection, the killer of curiosity, and when curiosity dies, so does the soul. Think about the people in your life who always have an answer, who never admit doubt, who speak with certainty about things they have never studied, never lived, never questioned. Ask yourself, do they make you think more or think less? Do they challenge you to explore or demand that you agree? Because the more time you spend with them, the more you begin to confuse confidence with truth. And once that happens, you stop asking the questions that could have changed everything. Avoid them, not because they are evil, but because they are stuck, and they want you to be stuck with them. Socrates would tell you that the examined life is your only path to freedom. But you cannot examine anything if you are being told how to think, what to say, and who to become. The person who pretends to know everything is not leading you toward wisdom. They are leading you away from it. There are people who do not lie outright, but what they do is far more dangerous. They bend the truth until it becomes unrecognizable. They speak with calm, calculated precision. They smile, they sound reasonable, but underneath every word is a subtle distortion designed to benefit them and confuse you. Socrates understood that the truth is not always easy to accept, but it must never be manipulated. He believed that words should be used to uncover reality, not to escape it. But manipulators do not see language as a tool for understanding. They see it as a weapon. Do not care about what is true. They only care about what is useful to them. This kind of person is intelligent, charming, sometimes even inspiring. They know how to make you doubt yourself without ever raising their voice. They can twist your words back at you and make it seem like you were wrong for even asking a question. They will say things like, "You are too sensitive," or "You misunderstood me," when you confront them with their contradictions. And over time, you begin to believe that maybe the problem is not them. Maybe it is you. That is the beginning of their power. Manipulators do not force control. They create confusion. And in that confusion, they build authority. If you're unsure of what you saw, what you heard, or what you felt, then you are vulnerable to suggestion. That is when they step in to offer their version of reality. It is never entirely false. That is what makes it so dangerous. It is just false enough to serve their purpose, and just true enough to make you believe it. Socrates feared this type of mind, not because it was evil, but because it was disconnected from the pursuit of virtue. He believed truth and goodness were tied together, that to be wise was to be honest, that to live well was to live truthfully, not just with others, but with yourself. The manipulator rejects that. They do not aim to grow, they aim to win, and in doing so, they poison the very foundation of trust. Around a manipulator, you begin to hesitate before speaking. You analyze everything you say, in case they use it against you. You second-guess your reactions. You start apologizing for things you did not even do, because they have trained you to believe that they are the truth, and that your instincts are not to be trusted. This is not just emotional manipulation. It is psychological conditioning, and the longer you are around them, the more you lose contact with your own reality. Socrates believed that dialogue should lead to clarity, that through questioning we come closer to understanding. But with a manipulator, every conversation becomes a fog. The more you talk to them, the less you see. They make you feel guilty for asking questions. They reward silence and punish curiosity. They convince you that their way of seeing the world is not just better. It is the only one that makes sense. But the moment you begin to adopt their vision, you lose your own. This is why Socrates refused to speak in absolutes. He asked questions not to confuse, but to reveal. He believed that truth should emerge between people, not be imposed by one over the other. The manipulator inverts this. They use questions not to explore, but to trap. They ask just enough to appear curious, but not enough to be changed by the answer. And when they are done bending reality, you are left disoriented, unsure of where you stand, who you are, or what is true. Avoid them, not because they are smarter than you, but because they refuse to be honest, with you and with themselves. They fear truth because it would cost them their control. And so they hide behind charm, intellect, and half-truths. Socrates would tell you, to be wounded by truth, then comforted by deception. The manipulator does not offer comfort. They offer control. And they will wrap it in beauty, reason, and affection. But at the end of it all, your mind will no longer belong to you. It will belong to them. Of all the dangerous people Socrates would warn you to avoid, perhaps the most corrosive is the one who believes in nothing. Not because they have reached that conclusion through philosophy or experience, but because they have chosen despair as a form of comfort. The cynic, the person who has replaced wonder with sarcasm, curiosity with mockery, and meaning with apathy. Cynicism wears many disguises. Sometimes it looks like intelligence. Sometimes it sounds like wit. But underneath the surface it is hollow. It is the echo of someone who gave up on seeking the truth because the truth became too painful. The cynic is not wise. They are wounded, and instead of healing, they weaponize their wounds. Socrates believed that the unexamined life is not worth living, but the cynic believes that life is not worth examining. They laugh at those who dream. They roll their eyes at those who try. They poke holes in everything they see. They never build anything of their own. They are critics without creation, observers without engagement, spectators who scoff from the sidelines while others dare to live. This kind of person is dangerous because they normalize disconnection. When you speak with hope, they call you naive. When you show emotion, they call you weak. When you pursue purpose, they call it delusion. And slowly, they chip away at your spirit, not by attacking it directly, but by convincing you it is foolish to even have one. Socrates embraced questions because he believed something worth knowing was always hidden behind them. But the cynic asks no questions because they have already decided the answers do not matter. They fear disappointment so deeply that they would rather believe in nothing than risk believing in something and being wrong. But in doing so, they reject not only meaning, they reject growth. A cynic is someone who has buried their potential beneath a thick layer of sarcasm and skepticism. They may sound intelligent. They may even seem philosophical. But their skepticism is not active. It is passive. They are not searching for truth. They are protecting themselves from it. And this has consequences for you. Spend enough time around a cynic, and you begin to question not what is real, but whether anything is real at all. You start to mute your excitement. You begin to feel embarrassed about your hopes. You second-guess your dreams, not because they are impossible, but because the cynic made you feel stupid for having them. This is soul decay, and it spreads quietly. Socrates believed that philosophy begins in wonder. The cynic believes it ends in disappointment, and so they never wonder at all. They dismiss everything before they ever engage with it. They will quote thinkers they barely understand. They will use irony as armor. They will act like nothing matters, and then wonder why they feel empty. Avoid them, not because they are wrong, but because they are stuck. And worse, they want you to be stuck with them. The cynic cannot stand someone who still believes, because belief is a mirror. It reflects back what they gave up. And instead of facing that grief, they would rather mock it. Cynicism is not depth. It is fear wearing the mask of intellect. Socrates would tell you that belief is not weakness, it is risk. To believe in something is to stand on uncertain ground with an open heart. It is to live. The cynic refuses that risk, and in refusing it, they become safe, but hollow. When you are around someone who believes in nothing, you begin to forget what it feels like to believe in yourself. That is the true danger. because a life without belief is a life without direction. And a mind without direction is easily led by bitterness, by fear, by stagnation. Do not confuse the cynic for a realist. The realist sees the world as it is and works with it. The cynic sees the world as a joke and laughs from a distance. And eventually, if you listen long enough, you will start to laugh too. But you will not feel joy. You will feel resignation. Some people want to understand the world. Others want to rule it. And the most dangerous among them are those who want power without wisdom, control without conscience. This is the person Socrates feared most, the one who cannot be questioned. You will know them not by how loud they speak, but by how they react when you ask, why? They bristle. They grow defensive. They try to silence you, not because your question is wrong, but because it threatens the illusion they have worked so hard to build. To question them is to challenge their identity, and for someone who worships power, that is unforgivable. Socrates made questioning his life's work. He walked the streets of Athens, asking young men, politicians, poets, what is justice? What is courage? What is truth? And many hated him for it, not because he was cruel, not because he was wrong, but because he revealed how little they actually knew. The power-hungry person cannot survive this. They need to be seen as infallible. Their authority rests not on truth, but on perception. If you doubt them publicly, even slightly, it puts a crack in their mask. And when that happens, their instinct is not to reflect, but to retaliate. They may not raise their voice, they may not punish you outright, but they will remember, and they will look for ways to reassert control, through shame, through exclusion, through fear. This is how they rule, not by reason, but by intimidation. Socrates understood that true power lies not in being unchallenged, but in being able to face challenges with humility. But the power-hungry person sees every challenge as an attack. They cannot distinguish between disagreement and disloyalty. They demand obedience, not respect. And this makes them profoundly dangerous, because they gather people around them who are too afraid to speak the truth. They create echo chambers. They promote the agreeable. They isolate the honest. Over time, their world becomes a closed loop of control, fear, and fragile dominance. When you are near someone like this, you begin to shrink. You start to censor yourself, even in your own thoughts. You stop questioning, not because you found the answers, but because you learn that asking brings pain. You begin to accept half-truths and contradictions, not because you believe them, but because it is easier than confronting the backlash. This is how tyranny begins, not always with violence, but with silence, the kind of silence that grows when truth becomes dangerous and power becomes sacred. Socrates refused to stay silent, even when it led to his trial, even when it led to his death. He believed that no one, not even the most powerful, should be above question. To him, the highest form of leadership was not control, but accountability. And the greatest danger to the soul was to give up your voice in the presence of someone who demands silence. The power-hungry person will always appear strong. They speak with certainty. They move with authority. But underneath their control is fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being seen. Fear of losing what they built on unsteady ground. Avoid them, not because they are powerful, but because they are desperate to stay that way. And that desperation will consume anyone who gets too close. They do not want dialogue. They want dominance. They do not want understanding. They want submission. And if you let them, they will slowly replace your questions with compliance. Socrates died because he refused to bow to this kind of power. And in doing so, he became more powerful than anyone who ever tried to silence him. So when you find yourself in the presence of someone who cannot be questioned, ask the question anyway. Because the truth is never safe in the hands of the unaccountable. And your freedom begins the moment you stop fearing their reaction and start honoring your own voice. Socrates did not leave behind scrolls or scriptures. He left behind questions. And in those questions, he gave us a map, a way to navigate not just ideas, but people, the ones who lie, the ones who manipulate, the ones who fear truth, mock belief, and demand control. Avoid them, not out of hatred, but out of love, for your mind, your spirit, your freedom. Because who you keep around you will shape who you become. And if you lose the courage to question, you lose the power to choose. So choose wisely, and never stop asking.